Well, I'd like to welcome everybody to Rotary meeting today. It's been a while since we've met. We've been busy, but that's a good thing. I want to give time for Luke to speak.
This feels like coming home.
I know.
Feels good. Yeah, I love the Rotary Club, and I'm just happy to be here to talk to everybody. I was hoping to share a little bit about what I've been up to and why I've been absent from our meetings the last couple years, a little bit too often. And then, so share a little bit about Sandstone Psychology, what we're doing in the community, how we're trying to help, and also kind of wanted to give a little bit of psychoeducation for the people in the group to kind of bring back to your families and your practices and places of business. I thought it'd be helpful. So just to back up, I guess I want to be mindful. So I'll go to about 10:02 and then kick it over to you, Aaron. So to remind people of my background, so I grew up in Payson, attended Payson High School. Towards the end of my senior year, I had an older brother pass away unexpectedly, and that kind of rocked my world a little bit. My good girlfriend, now wife at the time, she kind of cleaned me up and helped me kind of get through that. It was a really difficult situation. Then I left on an LDS mission. And like most LDS missionaries, they come home and they're thinking, well, what am I going to do for a career? I'm supposed to follow the Mormon algorithm of get married in the temple and go to church and graduate with a degree, have 5 kids, you know, the whole thing for success. But I kind of thought long and hard, and I wanted to have a career where I was just helping people. I knew that. So it originally drew me to want to become a medical doctor. So I went to UVU and I studied psychology and did all the pre-medicine courses, got into medical school, and right before I was supposed to start medical school, I had this kind of quarter-life crisis and realized I don't think medicine is exactly what I'm supposed to do, so I took a year off, and through that time did a lot of soul searching. I was working at an adolescent boys treatment facility where they deal with a lot of mental health issues, and had talked to a lot of therapists, a lot of psychiatrists, and kind of shadowed and tried to understand what they did in their world. And I realized I wanted to change fields and get a PhD in psychology to become a psychologist. So fortunately, I took one of 6 spots that they have in their program at BYU and got in there. Just had a really meaningful experience, learned a lot, and through that whole process on my mind was, how do I help where I came from? How do I help the suffering and the challenges that happen in southern Utah County, which was very underrepresented with mental health services. So through my training at BYU, I took my first job that I could as a student working in private practice at a really nice practice in Orem. And through that, meeting with the owners there, I said, well, what if we open a practice further south? They don't have much for psychologists or psychotherapy or testing or any of these things that mental health services provide. So 7 years ago, I opened Alliance Behavioral Psychology here in town and joined the Rotary Club and got to meet all of you guys. And you know, it's been a while, huh?
Yeah.
I know, we're growing up together. And that clinic grew steadily over 5 years, but really just felt more and more of a need to bring things to more populations. We are now coming back to Spanish Fork, though, at the end of the summer. But opened Sandstone Psychology 2 years ago. My business partner, Clay Franson, he does psychological testing, and he was a director of the Accessibility Center at BYU. I think he spoke about a year ago here on disabilities and helping that group. But we opened Sandstone June 1st of 2021, so almost exactly 2 years ago. And our mission is to not just improve mental health resources and access to care, but to start to reach more rural communities as well. Something important to us is to listen to people in meetings like this, or when we go meet with doctors or school professionals. We really just kind of open our ears and say, what are the problems you're seeing? And how can we help solve those mental health problems? So for example, one of the first things that we noticed kind of going around talking to more people was there was a dearth of autism services. One of the local autism services programs was just shutting down. There was another one that was trying to get going, and a lot of these doctors and pediatricians and school people were saying, we don't have anywhere for our autistic kids to get help. So I didn't personally come from a background of getting trained in autism, but that led Clay and I to get a lot of additional training and pay for autism kits to do more thorough evaluations, which led to us hiring what they call BCBAs, if you've heard of that profession. They're board certified behavioral analysts who specifically work with kids with autism. And last year we created an autism program, which now has, I think, 22 employees, and they provide services in the homes for kids who have autism. And we do a lot of diagnosing and help with that. But that came from what the community called for and what they wanted. Another thing was psychiatric care, so prescribing medications. We were having wait lists of 6 to 8 months to get in with psychiatrists up anywhere Springville North. There really wasn't much down in Payson or Spanish Fork. So a year ago, we hired a psychiatric nurse practitioner. Ruby Nelson works with us, and we have a second one who will be joining us when they finish school later this next year. But we started in Payson and pretty quickly outgrew our space. We have 12 offices in that space in Payson. You guys could come visit us if you want sometime. And then open an office in July in Salem, which has 6 offices there. And then opened a third office in February of this year down in Nephi, where we work kind of integrated care. We're in the visiting physicians wing of the Nephi Hospital, if you know Central Valley down there. And so we're serving that community and have 5 different therapists that go down there throughout the week to kind of help. But all along the way, our goal is let's listen to what the doctors, the hospital administrators, the school professionals, what are they all saying in terms of what they're needing for help, and then we try to build programs and hire therapists specifically for those needs. And then most recently, this is just the last few weeks, we've been down in Fillmore, which is a small-ish town. It used to be more of a thriving town back in the day, the original capital. But what we've been learning down there is there's a high need for Medicaid services. They have over half their students on reduced and/or free lunch. And so we're learning more about Medicaid, which we haven't previously before worked with. Wasatch Behavioral takes care of that here in our area. And so we're learning more about that, how to increase access to care. But one thing I wanted to focus on a little bit is the pandemics around us right now. We are still coming through COVID. And I've mentioned this in Rotary clubs in past years, but there is a plague with our kids right now. They're being raised in a time that, from an evolutionary standpoint, we have never done before as a species at all. To give you an example, I have a nephew who is 15, almost 16, and his first words were pad for iPad. That was his first word. But he's grown up on that. That was the very first word that he had. It's been his paradigm, and he's played all the games and been on all the screens, just like a lot of our kids are really drawn to. But because of that, and other reasons with social media and just the way things are, our kids are suffering right now. They have more emotional and social challenges than we have ever dealt with in our cohorts or our generations. The level of comparison, the level of being passive aggressive. A phrase that I use often in my first session with the clients that I work with comes from Buddhism, and it's suffering exists when we have pain that we resist. Screens are the perfect thing to make us resist pain. It's hedonism in your pocket. I can get something pleasurable and avoid anything painful right now. I just click on that app or swipe here or touch that, and pretty soon I feel kind of okay about the world in a numbing kind of way. Healing, on the other hand, from Buddhism is when we have pain that we learn how to accept. We learn how to cope with it. And so So our children have more opportunities to avoid their pain than they've ever had. Very often I'll ask these kids and or parents who are frustrated trying to figure out how to raise kids to be resilient, what do I do to help them? And I'll say, does your child know how to be bored? Nope. Oh, they can't stand being bored. It's too uncomfortable. So they hurry and quickly grab this or get on their Xbox or their Wii or whatever thing they're playing. And if you look at more my generation, so when I was a teenager, rates of people being involved in community service started to drop like crazy. And it's continued to go down, which is why, one of the reasons why I wanted to get involved with Rotary. In my undergraduate at UVU, I worked with a professor researching materialism and the effects of materialism. And individuals who kind of get in that hedonism trap where they want to get things quick and avoid things that are hard. You know, you can swipe a credit card, and now you can swipe a credit card and Amazon delivers it later that day or the next day in a lot of cases right now. But we just have everything we want when we want it, and it's undermining our resilience, and it's a plague. And it started mainly with my generation, but now the kids, and I'm 38 for reference, kind of around my age group. But our children are so steeped in it that I don't know if we realize it or they realize it. We've been desensitized to it quite a bit. Very similarly to visiting, you know, the farm or the dairy, and you smell that manure so fresh until you're there for 15 minutes and it doesn't smell bad anymore. That's how desensitization works. And I can remember being, you know, 3rd and 4th grade where people were talking about the internet just coming out, and parents were all scared about it. And then, you know, I get to 5th and 6th grade, and now parents are like, kids can find pornography on the internet. Did you know that? And how that affected my cohort of kids coming through high school, and all the shame and frustration and fear that parents were talking about and kids were dealing with. But now it's ubiquitous, it's everywhere. And we have that access all the time. And usually in every single room of the house, or we just carry it with us where we go. So a little nugget is help your kids be bored. One of our Rotary members a couple years ago, I am trying to remember his name. He was only with us for a little while, and then I think he and his wife might have gone on a mission. Thomas Brighton, that's who it was. He spoke at our club a couple years ago and said, I think he had been a mission president, and he said the best thing you could do for your kids is when they're a teenager, help them get a really boring job and make them stick with it. And I completely agree with that sentiment. Just helping them learn that value of work, that value of socializing, giving back to bigger causes, get them involved in service as much as you can. But that's one of the ways to raise a resilient generation. And then just lastly, just to kind of tie these things together, with Sandstone Psychology, we're as far north as we are ever going to grow is Springville. We've decided that. But we're trying to grow around the donut of the state of Utah where there's a lack of resources. And something that I wanted to help the club today with is how you can find elevated resilience. They call it Resilience 2.0. And we're going to watch a little video about it. But my hope is that you can become sort of gatekeepers when you talk with your grandkids, the people you work with, your children, people in your neighborhood, your church groups. How do we fight back against this pandemic of numbing, of desensitizing? I have a little video that I want to show.
There are only two kinds of people who do not experience painful emotions. The first kind are the psychopaths. The second kind are dead. There is a false understanding or expectation that a happy life means being happy all the time. No, learning to accept and even embrace painful emotions is an important part of a happy life, and the study of painful emotions is an important part of the field of happiness studies. My name is Tal Ben-Shahar. I'm a student and teacher in the field of happiness studies, and my most recent book is Happier No Matter What. There is a very important concept that was introduced by Nassim Taleb, and that is anti-fragility. Anti-fragility is essentially resilience 2.0. Resilience 1.0 is when we put pressure on a system. After the pressure is lifted, that system goes back to its original form. Anti-fragility takes this idea a step further. You put pressure on a system, it actually grows bigger, stronger. We see anti-fragile systems all around us and within us. For example, our muscular system. We go to the gym and we lift weights. We're putting pressure on our muscles. What happens as a result? We actually grow stronger. We're an anti-fragile system. On the psychological level, you know what that's called? PTG, post-traumatic growth. So where post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, is about breaking down, post-traumatic growth is about growing stronger. As a result of pressure, stress, it's anti-fragility. The role of the science of happiness is to teach us what conditions we can put in place to increase the likelihood of growing from hardship. Now, there is a paradox when it comes to pursuing happiness. On the one hand, we know that happiness is a good thing, whether in and of itself or as a means toward other ends. At the same time, we also know from research by Iris Moss and others that people who say to themselves, happiness is important for me, I want to pursue it, those individuals actually end up being less happy. In fact, they're more likely to experience depression. So the paradox is that on the one hand, happiness is clearly a good thing. On the other hand, valuing it as a good thing is problematic. So what do we do? The way to resolve this paradox is that we pursue happiness indirectly. Think about sunlight. So if I look at the sun directly, it's going to hurt my eyes. However, if I break down sunlight into its elements, into its constituents, I can look at the colors of the rainbow. So I'm indirectly looking at the sunlight, enjoying it, savoring it. In the same way, pursuing happiness directly can cause more harm than good. But breaking it down into its elements can lead us to enjoy the indirect pursuit of happiness and by extension, to raise our overall levels of happiness. What are the metaphorical colors of the rainbow when it comes to happiness? Here we have what I've come to call the SPIRE model, and it can trigger the anti-fragile system. SPIRE is an acronym that stands for spiritual, physical, intellectual, relational, and finally, emotional well-being. Spirituality is about finding a sense of meaning and purpose in life, at work and at home. If you wake up in the morning with a purpose, you're more likely to overcome barriers. When it comes to physical well-being, the most important idea to look at is stress, the silent killer. In the United States, more than half of the employees do not use up their vacation time. And even those that do, close to half are still tethered to their work. The problem is not the stress, it's the lack of recovery. With intellectual well-being, there's research showing that people who are curious, who ask questions, are not just happier, they also live longer. Another important element is not just asking questions, it's deeply engaging with material. It can be text, a work of art, even nature. Relational well-being is very important. The number one predictor of happiness is quality time we spend with people we care about and who care about us. And it turns out the number one condition that we can put in place to increase the likelihood of anti-fragility, of growing through hardship, is the quality of our relationships. Finally, emotional well-being. So embracing painful emotions is critical, but how do we then cultivate pleasurable ones? Specifically, the emotion of gratitude. Cicero talked about gratitude as the mother of all virtues. When we appreciate the good in our life, we have more of it. So happiness is much more than pleasure. Happiness is whole being. These 5 elements together create that sunlight, happiness. I don't think there is a point before which one is unhappy, after which one is happy. Rather, happiness resides on a continuum. It's a lifelong journey. And knowing that, we can have realistic rather than unrealistic expectations about what is possible. I do not think that things necessarily happen for the best. However, we can learn to make the best of things that happen.
All right. Thanks for watching that with me.